Hello, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar presentation, Transform Client Reporting into Value Stories. Your speakers today are Bruce Carver, Associate Vice President of Payer Services, and Chris Young, Director of Project Management. Before I turn things over to Chris, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for replay later this week. All attendees will be on mute for the entirety of the webinar. If you have a question, please submit them via the Q&A text box to the right of the screen at any time during the presentation, and we will address them during the question and answer portion. As a follow-up to today's presentation, you will also receive an email that includes a PDF of today's presentation and recording. Here you can see an overview of what we will be covering during today's presentation. We truly appreciate you joining us, and your feedback during this presentation is incredibly valued, so please be sure to participate in the various polls that will be administered during the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us, and with that, Chris will start today's presentation.
Thanks, Erin. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. If we could go ahead to the next slide. While that's coming up. Great. So we wanted to start out today, with that being said, about encouraging your participation via some polling. We do have a few polling questions and wanted to start out with a question for you. So you should see here in just a moment a poll pop up in your polling dialog box within the WebEx Control Center. And this question is, how effective has your organization been in implementing advanced analytics capabilities in support of your client reporting? Very effective, effective, somewhat effective, or not effective? Go ahead and that poll is now opened. We will give you about 15 to 20 seconds to select your answer, and we will gather those responses. Again, this is in the should be in the right side of your WebEx window, control panel. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and close that poll, and if we could advance the slide, please, we will take a look at the results of that poll here at the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for your input. So to kick us off, we just wanted to take a few moments to point out some trends that we're actually seeing in the market today. As the title implies, we are certainly data rich. We in healthcare know that we have a lot of data, and it's actually growing at a faster rate than average across industries, so 48% compared to 40% of the overall digital universe. That data actually is approximately 80% unstructured, and for those working with it, about 80% of their time is spent just trying to manage it versus analyzing it and gleaning insights from it. The analytics landscape is offering many point solutions today. You've got 72% of those surveyed customers said that they actually use more than 3 different analytics vendors, which is a lot to manage. And universally, we're challenged as an industry to effectively integrate data to unlock the potential business value from analytics solutions which span the entire health plan or even across the entire health system, across payer and provider. Next slide, please. A few more data points as this slide comes up here that we see and some of the specific challenges we face. So with all that data available, it's pretty amazing. 88% of survey respondents said that they aren't excelling by using the data to improve quality and reduce costs. That's a pretty consistent thing that we hear. And nearly all respondents in a survey said that they have not realized a return on investment in their enterprise data warehouse and analytics investments. That's staggering. There's a ton of money being spent on point solutions across both payers and providers. A stat here, over $6 billion expected in 2019 to be spent. And folks are seeking to find ways to unlock that potential business value from the data from analytics solutions which span the entire enterprise. We do see some specific challenges which health plans face today, among others. And I'll just point out these four: shifting requirements and mandates. Healthcare is certainly never a boring space. There's always something exciting happening in the news. This often compounds the proliferation of data, new data to collect and manage. Proper technology to deal with the enormous amounts of data in the plan is necessary and is often a challenge. Enterprise data warehouses have not been the end-all, be-all, ultimate solution for yielding the analytical insights from the data, and they require a lot of attention and rework, and that often results in lower ROI on those investments. And analytics solutions are being adopted within silos, or perhaps not at all. A new solution's implemented and not adopted, and they cost a lot to implement, and they don't often serve the entire set of enterprise users. Next slide, please. So we're just a little bit about MedeAnalytics. Bruce and I are with MedeAnalytics, and MedeAnalytics is a pioneer in healthcare analytics. We were the first to market with healthcare SaaS analytics solution. We've been at this as a company for approximately 2 decades, and we've expanded our focus from initially, many years ago, just on provider revenue cycle management, into other areas of healthcare, including the payer space, which we'll talk about today. And while the technology and healthcare environment have changed dramatically over the past 20 years, our original mission is to help our clients make smarter decisions, and that hasn't changed. We have offices across the U.S. and in the U.K., about 1,500 clients or more, actually, and we're frequently recognized as one of the top places to work in healthcare. And our clients recognize the value that we bring as a partner, as an analytics partner. We're more than just a vendor to our clients. Next slide, please. A few more data points about who we are. We manage a lot of data for our clients, about 600 terabytes of data and more than 25,000 daily data feeds with more than 3 billion unique encounters within that data. And we serve, again, more than 1,500 clients across both payer and provider, and we serve more than 60 million covered lives. Our analytics and healthcare expertise are used on your behalf or our client's behalf to leverage your data to identify meaningful, actionable insights. And really, it's more about it's about more than just the data. It's about what you do with it that counts. So that's a little bit about us. Let's jump right into to the main portion here. We'll talk a little bit about client reporting, employer reporting. So what is your gut telling you? It's probably telling you it's about time for lunch, since it's about lunchtime, and that's probably something you wouldn't need data to actually confirm. But there's some interesting information on this slide. So one of the quotes that I really like is from an Israeli psychologist named Daniel Kahneman, and he won the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. And he said, "No one ever made a decision because of a number. They need a story." And I think there's a lot of research out there which examines decision making, whether it's from a managerial perspective or from an economic perspective, like Daniel Kahneman has done, or other perspectives. There's a lot of research, and it's interesting that even with the great increases in just having data available and at your fingertips, there's some research to show that that decision makers still actually prioritize their gut feeling over the data. In fact, there was a study done which concluded that approximately 90% of business decision makers would prioritize gut feel over data if there was a contradiction between the two. And I find that really interesting, but we ask ourselves why that is. We've learned to trust our gut. That's natural for most of us. We feel that our gut feel has less risk than shifting to a data-driven culture. And we know it's hard to shift a culture in such a large way. But the reality is your gut feeling may be wrong. So it's important to consider the data when making decisions, whether you're a health plan, a broker, an employer group, a health plan member, etc. And it's important in demonstrating the value that you're bringing to your stakeholders that you have the data to help you tell the story to demonstrate that value. So with that, we'll move to the next slide, which is actually a polling question. So get ready to find that polling booth in the corner of your WebEx and answer this question if you don't mind. If you have observed that health plan decision makers are prioritizing gut feel over a data-driven decision, what do you feel is challenging the cultural shift? A, I don't have any access to data and tools that leadership understands. B, timely access to data. C, trust in data. Or D, I don't have this problem. We are a data-driven culture. So we'll open up that poll. Go ahead and find that spot. We'll leave that open for about 15 to 20 seconds. Okay, so that poll has ended. Thank you for your responses. We'll take a look at that at the end here. So, what is data storytelling? Gartner has a really great definition of data storytelling that's really simple, but I think fairly profound. So data storytelling is visualization plus narrative plus context. That's the definition. But let me go through these piece by piece. So visualization, I think of that as, sifting through lines of data in a table or a spreadsheet can be really cumbersome, really difficult. But seeing a chart or a graph can just make something pop off the page or the screen and tell the story much quicker, or help tell the story much quicker than looking through a data table. Narrative, when I think of narrative, is what are we looking at? It's one thing to throw a chart or graph in front of someone, but we also need to describe what we're actually seeing, what are the assumptions and what has been built to show us. Context, I ask, why is this happening? So context about why something might be happening is critical. Perhaps there was a spike in enrollment due to a large acquisition by an employer group, and these members were entirely different risk profile than the existing membership, just as a simple example. Now, in data storytelling, it's important that we talk about a concept called data constructs. So data constructs are really important in data storytelling. And the question I ask myself is, how is my data being brought together to support my storytelling needs? By combining data constructs, we can actually create a visualization and describe the narrative output and give context in a story. And we can also then know what organizational levers can be pulled to alter or change an outcome. Next slide, please. I'm showing this slide intentionally. I don't expect you to be able to read all these boxes. In fact, I don't think I'll keep this up here long enough for you to see all the boxes. But what this is really all of the different functional areas within a health plan, or many of them. There's probably more that have not been listed here. But this is a majority of places where things are happening in a health plan. Data is being generated. We have loads of data across the health plan. And we have data about the benefit products. We have data about the provider network, about enrollment and membership and billing. We have data about claims, whether it's the adjudication of those claims or adjustments. We have customer service data. We have care management data, tons of data everywhere. And so thinking about which data to use to tell the story is something that we all work through daily. What can best tell the story, and where can I get that data? So what data constructs will we work with to tell the story is what we ask ourselves. Next slide, please. So data constructs that influence trend. So data constructs are used to describe a business dynamic that is often not directly measurable. It can be hard to get a readout on it. But in this example, enrollment and claims data can be used together to measure things like how service location could impact unit price and cost and ultimately affect a trend. Or provider practice patterns could impact service complexity, which could impact severity risk, which ultimately can also influence a trend. Or which services are being selected by a patient or member possibly unnecessarily at their discretion, which are impacting a trend. So it's important to note when you think about data constructs that each one of these constructs doesn't provide a whole lot of insight individually. But if you think back to that value chain slide that I just showed across the entire health plan, you have, when you can combine constructs and use them together, you can actually make an impact you can impact cross-organizational outcomes that require, coordination across claims, across customer service, across enrollment, across benefit. So that's how we view the data constructs that are used ultimately to build up and provide a data story. If we move to the next slide, please. These are just some examples of different constructs. And each of these examples has, in the middle column there of the table, measures. And so some of those are cost-focused measures like per member per month, PMPM, or cost per episode, or cost per unit. Others could be more utilization-focused measures like services per 1,000, or percent of services in preferred setting, or in or out of network utilization. Others could be quality of care focused like risk scores, for example, for that population. So the levers, which are in the rightmost column of the table, those could be things that require coordination across multiple areas of the health plan, like we said, in order to affect that measure that's tied back to that data construct. So the levers can be pulled when you understand what they are and where they are and what impact that they could actually have. So for example, if you're seeing provider practice patterns which are concerning through the different measures in place, like cost per episode, for example, which we get using ETGs, episode treatment groups, you have several levers available to actually pull. So you could look at provider payment models, or you could look at utilization and care management programs, or you could even look at benefit product design. These levers then can move the needle on these measures and thereby impact the trend direction. Next slide, please. So as we talk about this and we talk about all the data that we have and how much of it is growing and exponentially and gathered and then brought together in constructs, surfacing those up into actual insights is what we work on every day at MedeAnalytics and what our software products attempt to do. And I just wanted to walk you through that process because I think that helps as we walk through getting data up to insights. So from the first, I would start from the bottom of this particular stack of concepts, is where we start with comprehensive data orchestration. So our platform actually takes in data from all kinds of different sources and from more than 3,000 different systems today. We've got over 25,000 data feeds on a daily basis, and we join all that data up in a high-performing repository. The next layer on top of that is our technology stack. So our platform leverages the who's who of technology vendors. You see a lot of the logos here. We're constantly staying on top of the newest and best technology. And we leverage this technology to apply analytics over a meaningful set of data. The next layer up from that is our platform, our intelligent analytics platform, MedeWorks. So this is actually the intuitive user interface which allows for ad hoc analysis, visualizations, chart building, report scheduling out to employer groups at large scale. We have invested significantly in this user experience and are ensuring a common look and feel across all of our products. They all look and feel the same with the same capabilities. We've invested in visualization capabilities to ensure that people have easier access to interpret the data. We have security with role-based security, ensuring that the right data gets into the hands of the right users. And MedeElevate is here to the right under the platform section, which Bruce is going to talk a lot about today and where we're going with emerging advanced technologies like guided analysis, machine learning, predictive analytics, and more. On the top, you see our solutions. These are our products, or our product lines, actually. And this is these product lines span across both payer and provider markets. Employer reporting actually is one of our products, and it falls within the payer operations product suite. These products are actually designed to solve specific use cases or specific problems which healthcare organizations face today. The last part of this chart that I would call out is the MedeCreate column to the right of the stack. And this really is a key part of our strategy in that it enables easy innovation with our platform for certain clients or partners to innovate on their own. We recognize that there may be some functionality that a health plan or a health system wants that we don't have, but we still want you to have the flexibility to import, for someone to import their own data, associate it with their dashboards and views, and really be able to leverage that all within the same Mede platform. And it has the same data integrity, same data stability, same look and feel for your users, so you're not creating, again, siloed solutions that the different groups may use for different purposes from different sources of data. Next slide, please. So if you remember that value chain slide that showed all the different things that are done in a health plan to add value in those functional areas, we create solutions which seek to solve specific use cases with the available data across that value chain. So those highlighted here in green are specific to client reporting, and they're things like viewing, for a specific account or group or subgroup, what are the specific trends and insights that we're seeing for that group. Benchmarking capabilities against either the plan overall book of business or other benchmarking cohorts that are defined, or third-party data even. Cost and utilization reporting as well as things like risk stratification with ACGs and reporting that back to accounts, to help tell that value-based story. How are we as a plan delivering value to your members, your employees? And then other solutions as well that span across the entire value chain. So we'll move to the next slide. So really quickly, I wanted to walk you through an example of the beginnings of a data story. And this is not intended to be a complete data story, but this is using some of our tooling, how we could go about putting together a data story so that demonstrates the value of bringing all this data together and bringing those insights, surfacing those insights to an employer group or account. So I'm reviewing a dashboard which presents a bunch of information about high-cost claimants. And this is I'm interested to know what's going on at a specific employer group, so I've filtered down to that group. I've got some helpful charts to review which show the PMPM trend for this account versus the benchmark of the overall plan business, which I've got a geo map here as well to see where the high-cost claimants are predominantly located by zip code. I've got a few other charts here as well, and this dashboard actually, over the course of a few pages, I'll walk you through this. But in the middle here, I've got some annotations which I made about the insights that I'm seeing here within this dashboard. And these are things like the account's total paid PMPM is trending lower than average in the past quarter, and it's actually been mostly the case for the past 8 quarters, so something's going well. The chronic condition by paid PMPM for high-cost claimants with over 50,000 in paid claims is chronic heart failure. It's a key piece of information. And actually 3.2% of the total claimants accounted for more than 55% of the total paid dollars for high-cost claimants with over $25,000 in paid claims. So just some insights, just cleaning up of those first few charts that I'm able to document into this dashboard if I was going to tell this story to an account or an employer group, for example. Next slide, please. So in this one, a little bit further down in the same dashboard, my facility inpatient costs are really high, actually. Of my total allowed, it's almost half, which means we probably have got a lot of members with heart issues or going to the hospital. What's going on there? Even though chronic heart failure was the highest paid PMPM for chronic conditions, an interesting insight here is that hypertension is actually the most frequent by claims volume and is also the most expensive by total paid dollars. So I can see that down here in the bubble chart that I've called out. And these hypertensive members are on track to having additional high-cost claims and engagement with the employer group to explore wellness programs, options, or other avenues of changing behavior could be appropriate in this case, and that could be the story that's told. Next slide, please. I can quickly get down to the detail from that dashboard to see specific members we're talking about here. This is all dummy data, don't worry. Or to be able to view the specific claims and claim lines, which are actually driving these high costs for these high-cost claimants. So with these different levels of detail, I can tell the stories I need to tell the audiences, the stories I need to tell to the audiences I need to tell them to. Next slide, please. So bringing it together, each of these audiences requires a variation on the story which we're constructing. So, but it all needs to be based on the same data, so the story doesn't change depending on which system or set of applications you're using. So in our platform and products, we're able to display the data in multiple different ways to appropriately suit the audience. If that's an employer group, like the one on the left here, who wants to know, this gentleman wants to know why his group's PMPM keeps going up, and there's reports that can be provided to him and data. Or if there's a health plan CFO trying to understand why plan costs have risen for the past 3 quarters, like the lady here in the middle, or health plan chief medical officer wondering whether care management programs are making a difference in the health of members, really looking at that from a high level. What are the high-level outcomes of those efforts? Or maybe it's a care manager at the end here seeking to identify populations for which she could improve health outcomes for the population. So from a dashboard level, 50,000-foot level, to summary report more at the aggregate level, and then down to the detail report at the claim line level or the claim level, you can get as high level or as low level as needed to tell the right story and demonstrate the value that's being provided to your customers. So getting them to understand that data story is far more important than teaching them how to sift through a bunch of raw data. That's why we feel that serving up the right analytic insights within the same platform on the same data to the right audience is really the key. So with that, I want to transition us into the next section, which Bruce will lead us through around emerging technologies at MedeAnalytics.
All right, thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time today talking about our emerging technologies, some of the things that we're doing from an advanced analytics perspective, machine learning. And again, just as a reminder, I'm a VP of Payer Services here at MedeAnalytics, and I spend a lot of time traveling all over the U.S. talking to our health plan clients and potential clients. And one of the things that I'm constantly engaging in a conversation in is this discussion of advanced analytics and what are you doing with regard to machine learning and AI and other predictive models as it relates to our analytic and reporting platform. And I, the things that I hear in the marketplace in terms of where folks are at is it spans the grid. There are things that I hear about with regard to predictive models and how well some of these predictive models have been told or sold into the health plan. It's a very interesting time as I think the hype cycle of this is everyone's talking about the right things. I'm not sure everyone's actually executing on all of those things currently in the market. And what you're looking at here is the Gartner Hype Cycle for emerging technologies around data science and machine learning, and it is essentially where I thought it would be. A lot of folks talking about it, and and like I said, the right discussions, but ensuring that when you're whatever data or technology solution you're putting in place, those things are great as long as the organization is ready to absorb that information and be able to use the insight that it provides to become more data driven with that additional information in place. I'm going to spend a little bit of time digging into machine learning. This is one topic that I probably spend most of the majority of my time in this advanced analytic discussion space. And there are different types of machine learning that you can actually leverage or use. So I'm going to break those down a little bit so that you can get a little bit better of an understanding on what you're probably already using in your space, in your health plan today with regard to machine learning, and what are some of the newer things that are starting to come to the surface from analytic capabilities that are leveraged or used to help out from a health payer perspective. When we look at machine learning, at its very definition, the computer is said to learn from experience, which is E, with respect to some task and some performance. If its performance on T, as measured by T, improves with experience, which is E, which is essentially the various different ways that you can set up an algorithm, if you will, around machine learning. And that can either be supervised, unsupervised, semi-supervised, or reinforcement learning. So let's take a look at a few of these. In machine learning, for supervised learning, your training data has labels. You already know the answer to the question for some of your data, but don't confuse that with you're using a data model to support a predetermined outcome. You don't necessarily know the answer, you just know some of your data components. You already know whether or not a subset of your population exhibits a certain quality. Use them to predict whether or not new subsets will exhibit that quality. And oftentimes what you probably are already using in your organization today is some form of a regression model or classification. Some of the examples that fall into this supervised learning might be predicting deductible or forecasting PMPM, which is essentially a regression model for machine learning, predicting whether a particular member should be flagged as a potential opioid abuser. We actually have a model like that that we have in place at Medi, and I'll actually go through some of that here in a little bit. In unsupervised machine learning, which is oftentimes described as more exploratory, where you're looking for underlying patterns. You don't have the answers or to some of your data. So some of the unsupervised type of learning that could occur within a machine learning model are things like anomaly detection or clustering. I'll go to the opioid abuser, identifying a potential opioid abuser. You might have your machine learning algorithm determine what are the different clusters or common clusters of people that are on opioids. What do those common clusters start to look like, and can that clustering identify different ways that you might engage that population, or you might want to provide outreach to based on how those clusters are coming together. So that might be an ongoing machine learning capability, or you might actually have your model only learn that one time as a part of your output. So that's a little bit about what that unsupervised process looks like. In the semi-supervised process, which is oftentimes where in reinforcement learning, when I get into a conversation with folks about machine learning, this is essentially what they're thinking about when they say, hey, I want, tell me about what you guys do for machine learning, or what you know about machine learning, and is it applicable, or can I use it in the healthcare space? So here in this process, the semi-supervised one, and I used somewhat of a non-healthcare example to this, but it's, loading up photos into like Google Photos, and then identifying who a person is one time, and then having that algorithm, when they see that picture or that face again, automatically know who that is, right? So there's somewhat of a semi-supervised process that's occurring to be able to get the output or the answer that you're looking for. In reinforcement learning, this is when that system observes its environment and makes decisions on actions to take based on rewards and or penalties it's experienced from previous actions. This is where, when I get into that conversation of machine learning, where everyone in their mind is thinking, this is what machine learning does. But we have to be careful on its applicability into the health payer space. Because if we're actually allowing a reinforcement learning process to take place, we're going to be operating in a model where that reinforcement learning, in generation one, you could have something falling down. If this is like a robot learning to walk, it might take 999 times for something to be able to learn how to do something. So in that reinforcement learning, you're really identifying how many things, it's learning everything wrong in order to learn things right. And so oftentimes, think of the processes you put in place around cost and utilization. Do you really have the patience for a model like that to take place in order to provide you with the output you're looking for? And oftentimes the answer to that's no. So which algorithm do you use is really dependent upon what you want to do with the data, the size of that data, the quality of that data, the available computational resources at that time. Back when I sat inside the health plan, there were many data models that we would want to put in place, and then identified that we didn't even have the infrastructure or the hardware in place to be able to actually run them. And honestly, it's that ease of understanding required by the end user. So once you start providing an output to your data model, is it something that the business is actually going to easily understand and be able to action against? Or do you really just have a cool science project that you've essentially put into place, and ensuring that the output of this can actually be leveraged back into your business unit and take action upon it is a critical step to putting any of these advanced analytic capabilities in place. Some of the ways that we're leveraging and using analytics within at MedeAnalytics is through a process or a capability we call MedeElevate, leveraging data to prescribe actions. So there's not only the machine learning component that I've talked about, but guided analysis around having anomaly detection, identify potential issues, and directs the user to a root cause. We do have some predictive analytic models that we have in place, and I'll talk about here in a few minutes about what our approach is to putting those types of predictive models in place. Transparency and collaboration in terms of how this data and output is shared with the end user that Chris touched upon a little bit in his section. So as we start to look at that workflow, where we're now looking at subscribing to a machine learning process that has powered alerts, and for years, MedeAnalytics has had an alerting notification component to its analytic platform, where the end user actually goes in and sets the threshold around an alert to be able to produce the output or answer. And it tracks against that. Well, now our platform is basically looking for those anomaly detection on its own, providing actions on prescribed actions they can take based on that anomaly, and then the end user can then monitor their progress towards whatever goal they're going after. When it comes to our data in MedeCreate, our data science utility, as opposed to taking an approach where we hire a ton of data scientists to put these predefined models in our platform, we're building out a capability that allows the end user to be able to put their data science utility, or that code, if you will. Let's say that they have Python code around any predictive model that might have to do with prediction of high cost claimant, prediction of high risk maternity, that you're putting that model in place within our MedeCreate platform, ingested to be able to then produce out visualizations or track against what that predictive model is doing with the data that we've already ingested as a part of our platform. That's part of the value of that when Chris talked about that stack slide of how we ingest a ton of disparate healthcare data, aggregate that all into a single platform. That's oftentimes the data that a health plan is going to access when it goes to putting any type of advanced analytic model in place. So as opposed to drawing data outside of Medi and running that data against your own R or Python script, we're allowing that capability to embed into our platform so that you can actually run that information right integrated into the platform to be able to report out results against it. Some of the other focuses that we're looking at and doing as well is around predictions, recommendations and explanations, and putting on our roadmap a chatbot in place that's kind of a Ask Medi type of process And I'll give you a couple of examples of what that's starting to look like. So from that prediction standpoint, I talked a little bit about that potential opioid abuse population and looking at investigating best models for automatically identifying that potentially suspicious data, using machine learning to cluster like people, if you will, around that process, so that you're identifying within the health plan what is the potential audience or part of that membership that I want to likely engage from a clinical management or intervention perspective, or do I want to go target a certain subset of providers that are over prescribing opioids, so that you've got answers getting surfaced that you're going to be able to take immediate action on. Around the smart alerts, if you will, is directly tied into that anomaly detection. So if we've got an account forecasting process in place, you can basically go through here and see where you start to see increases or decreases in that account forecasting, flagging alerts as a part of that process to be able to communicate to the end user. From a guided analysis perspective, also looking at whereas traditionally in our platform in the past, you've been able to get a lot of good insight and detail into the data, and in this case, we're looking at the trends on total PMPM broken out by service category. The end user would have to look at this and basically get information, like drill into information and search for additional details as to what's driving the information that you're looking at here. And as a part of that process, we're now saying, all right, if I want to drill down into this spiked category here, and I want to explore exactly what that variance is, I'm going to click down into that, and I'm going to go into, well, in my outpatient area here, I can see a major contributor, 30% of that increased total PMPM is on facility inpatient around transplant. And then I can click on that explore one claimant that falls into there that's spiking my cost in that area and drill down to the member level detail, so that you're now opening up or creating a greater ability for a lot more users inside of your health plan to be able to get in and drill into the data and understand it without having to organize a group of people around an analyst or a data scientist to try to find resources to be able to stand that data up and then be able to explain it. Chatbot is another really neat feature that we're putting in place here as well, so that and again, it expands the amount of users to a broader range of users, such as even executives, as you could stand up a dashboard around financial cost and utilization trending, and then be able to type in to the chat box and ask specific questions that you might be able to provide there. So those are some of the things that we're actually putting into place at Medi. But I think one of the most important things to consider as you start to look at some of these more advanced features is what that looks like in terms of the analytic solutions that you have in place today, the infrastructure and hardware structure that you have in terms of how your data is brought together, and then how you're bringing the right resources into your health plan to be able to stand up that capability and evolve it at the same time. It's one thing to be able to put the capability in place. It's another to have the right resources in place so that you can communicate effectively and internally in the organization, and also be able to message that externally as it gets influenced into the different benefit structures, contracts that you put in place. All of that stuff needs to work seamlessly together in order for it to be successful. So that's a point of discussion or an area that you'll want to pay particular attention to. So in summary, around some of this whole kind of this power of data storytelling, one of the things that I commonly see, for folks that are very successful around this, is that they have this single source of truth when to improve collaboration among key stakeholders. So have that single source of truth, whether you're analytic and reporting that internal users are using, that also external users, your clients, your brokers, your consultants also have access to be able to get in there to drive their results. Easier data access, greater data integrity. The easier they can get to that data, the easier way that you can stand up more informed insights to them, as opposed to just repeatable static reporting, the more they're going to engage with you, the more they're going to want to have and evolve with the discussion with you, so that you can continue to promote the value that you're bringing to them as their health plan, as their health plan. Evaluate and experiment with different techniques and outputs, so evolve beyond just recycling that same static information, and prepare programs to develop and instill narrative skills for business analysts and data savvy end users, so that you're standing up more than just a few, but you're standing up many within the organization, to be able to help you out and advance that analytic capability within your organization. So that is what we have for today. And I believe we are at our question and answer time. And for those that are out there, I know this is kind of like a one-way street on webinars. Both Chris and I would like to thank you for attending the webinar today. And please contact us here at the web link below if you have any additional questions. Erin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Bruce and Chris. Yes, if you have questions that you would like to have addressed during this webinar, please send them via the Q&A feature of the webinar that's located at the right of your screen. I do have a few questions that have come in that we'll start with, so I'm going to start one off for both you, Bruce and Chris. And that question is, do you see storytelling happening online real-time against the data or offline in more prepared presentations?
I'm starting, Chris, I'll take this one. I'm starting to see historically, it has been, the health plan has prepared a static presentation, brought that out. They might have contextual information to share with the health plan around that. Where I'm seeing that evolve now is that static presentation is now taking the form of more of a data view within the analytic platform, so that they can drill down or have other details available to them to have that discussion. There's one thing, if I hear that messaging again and again from a health plan, it's we want to be able to go out and talk to our clients and be able to answer all of the questions that they have at the meeting versus having to take information back and do additional research.
Thank you. Next question. If I leverage your product platform as a data science utility, does my model stay with me, or is it then available for use by other clients?
That model, that's a great question. That model would actually stay with them. And if they would, one of the things we are considering is that kind of creating a data science marketplace, if you will, that if you're willing to share that model out with other clients within that are on the Medi platform, that it's almost like a shared library book, if you will, where that model could be shared across other plans, and you would also be open to getting other predictive or data science models available to you as well. So we're looking at both of those, but right now, if that data model is stood up into your capability, it is your model and your model only.
Great. One more question. What is MedeAnalytics doing around natural language generation today?
Chris, I can take that one. Yeah, sure. So NLG, or natural language generation, there are several different levels of NLG. And kind of the most basic level is bullets or sentences which can be automatically generated with natural sounding language. That's why it's called natural language generation, to describe the data. So these would be like contextual bullets, for example, either in print-ready reporting. We actually have this today, as well as also within dashboards. So we have recently a new platform capability that's being made available that we can have dynamic text within a dashboard that can be, you have to configure it, and it would be something that would be configured in the back end, but that would have these contextual bullets that automatically generate if it was an increase or a decrease, and by how much, and those change with the filters that are selected within the dashboard. So we're working on, we've got a couple things in sort of that first level of NLG right now. I'd say a level up from that would be more advanced and nuanced language, like synonyms, for example. So like the many, many ways that you can express something, and having some logic that would use different synonyms. Like that's where we see a lot of the NLG solutions at today, at that level. Still very template-based and rule and business rule-based approach. And then I'd say the most advanced NLG, which obviously we'd be exploring as well, would be automatically generating a paragraph or a summary of what's occurred and what might have happened in the background, which wouldn't totally be visible from the surface, and that those types of insights are generated automatically with limited templating and business rules. So that's what we're doing around that today, and we're also exploring how we can further that as well into some of those additional levels. Thanks for the question.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That is the end of our questions. So with that, we will wrap things up. Thank you again to everyone who joined us and participated for your questions, as well as participating in our polls. And as a reminder, we will be sending you a PDF as well as the recording of today's presentation. Thank you so much and have a great day.